All right. Well, this is Don Rickabaugh with the Owner Financing and Note Investing podcast. Thank you for joining me. I have a special guest, David Olds, and he is deep in the real estate investing world and has leveraged all of that wisdom that he has gained into a very, it sounds like, and I'm going to explore this along with you,
Yeah.
he has to offer because, it's tough once you even get a lot of deals going, then how do you keep everything put together? And I can't wait to hear what David has to say. So, David, thank you for
Awesome.
being with me.
Oh, Don, it's
Let's,
my pleasure to be here.
yeah, tell us a little bit. Tell me a little bit about
A
you.
little bit. Yeah, I like I was telling you before, I'm just your basic investor. Nothing really super special about me. I bought my first house with my wife back in 2002, back, way back before anything was anything. Bought it and I didn't realize I bought a foreclosure from Wells Fargo, which I thought was very weird that, I went into the closing, right? And I thought it was going to be this big event, and I thought there was going to be somebody on the other side of the table, and we were going to pass keys across and do all those things. And nobody else was there. It was just me, my agent, and and the title person. But yeah, bought that house, fixed it up a little bit, sold it 2 years later, made 50,000, back to the same title company with the same agent. And she said, hey, you don't have to pay taxes on this because you lived in it. It's homestead exemption and tax free and all those things. I'm like, that's amazing. Let's do this again. So I
Right.
bought another house that was twice as much and, did a bunch of work on that and sold it maybe 2.5 years later and made 100,000. I said, I need to figure this out. This is pretty great. Like most investors, I stumbled upon Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that was kind of how I got started. Got involved in the local RIA in Central Florida and just went to as many classes and events as I could because we didn't have this, right? We didn't have great experts jumping on doing very niche podcasts where you could actually go in and learn stuff. It was back then, Don, it was, you remember it was the heyday of the RIAs, right? Like all that was all you had for education. There, Facebook didn't exist, Google didn't exist, YouTube was in its infancy. There were a couple of people on there, but you had to go to the local meeting and do the networking and sit through the classes and the weekend boot camps and all of that stuff. So yeah, so started that in the mid 2000s and started to learn about subject to and owner financing and wholesaling and all of the different things. And then so that was good. So my wife at the time and us, we were flipping houses, because we both had full-time jobs, so we weren't full-time investors yet. And I actually, my day job, I worked for 84 Lumber. So I was an outside salesman. So I sold doors and windows and garage doors and trusses and all of those things. And my wife was a purchasing manager for a custom home builder. And that was all great until the end times, until 2008 and then 2009, where it just absolutely dropped off of a cliff.
Right.
And yeah, just kind of out of desperation and looking at other markets, we ended up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Moved here just 100% for real estate. I did not know one person when we moved here. We picked it off of the data, which was a crazy thing to do. We moved here with literally $5,000 in our pocket. It was me, my wife, my two boys, and three fat dogs. It was the epitome of that whole burn the boats thing. We're just going to leave all this behind and move there. And it was the dumbest thing ever. I wouldn't suggest anybody do that. It's a terrible thing to do if you're a husband and a father. But luckily we made it work and actually started a really successful wholesaling business.
I
And
take it here means Florida.
well, I'm in Chattanooga still. I moved
Oh,
here in the
okay.
middle of '09. We left Florida and we came to Chattanooga. So all of our businesses are based here now. But yeah, it's interesting. When I was in Florida, I couldn't get wholesaling to work. I guess probably because I didn't need it to work. I had a good job and we were flipping a few houses a year. But once I got up here, Chattanooga, had no money, no income, no nothing, just literally $5,000. That was all that we had between us. We literally had to figure something out, and that was, wholesaling. I went and bought some blank bandit signs and some markers and started writing "We Buy Houses" and putting out signs because that's all we had in 2009. We didn't have texting and PPC and PPL and it was direct
Uh,
mail or bandit signs and door knocking. That was about it. And but what's funny, the thing that we moved here to do, we wanted to buy apartment complexes, right? Kind of like Monopoly, right? Single family duplex apartment complex. But we remember 2009 because we've been around for a long time. Banks were not lending money. Banks were very busy taking properties back.
Right.
So, that kind of went out the window very quickly, but I was able to wholesale and I got really good at that. And, at some point though, I decided, hey, I want to buy properties, right? I want to buy rental properties because I was 40. Like I was old already in 2010, 2011. And because I wanted to retire. So I'm like, wholesaling is great, but it's a hustle and you don't want to do it for 10 years. Like I did it for like 12 years and that was like I was a lifer. But it's a lot of work every day getting up and just, doing that grind. And, we
Right.
had an office with like 20 people and, we were scaled out across the country. But, back in 2010, I said, geez, I want to buy some properties and I would make some offers with people who had mortgages. So we would purchase it and take over their mortgage, would buy it subject to. Um, but what was happening back then, just kind of to lead into how we got our properties, Don, I would go out to somebody's house and, let's say I would offer you $90,000 for your property, but, you owe 130. Well, that's a problem, right? You're constantly coming up against that because values had dropped below what the mortgage was.
Right.
So, I would come home at night and I'm like, well, there's got to be a solution here, right? Like, Davy boy, what are we going to do? So, I remembered, way back years and years and years ago when I was at one of these meetings in Orlando and there was a speaker and on he said, he talked about the number of properties in the United States that were owned free and clear. Do you have any idea what percent that is?
Nope, I don't.
40%. If you go search Google right now, First American says that anywhere between 38 and 42% of all of the properties in the United States are owned free and clear, which is shocking because we just assume everybody has a mortgage, right? But they
Yeah. So
don't.
you're saying that is this year or back when you were
No,
starting?
that's now.
Oh,
It's been
you
a
know
steady.
what? That's a good number for me to know. Actually, I didn't
Yeah,
know it was that quite that high. I know there's a lot because a
yeah,
lot of my, clients, that's where notes come from is people who
yeah,
own properties free and clear
yeah.
and then they sell, right, on terms. So,
It's been 6 months since I looked it up, but still, yeah, it's been roughly 40% forever. So so I thought to myself, if I need to target my marketing to these people, because my thought process is in the beginning was wholesale. So, if I offered you 90 and you wanted 130, you may not have liked the 90, but you at least could have taken it, right? So
right,
that was my first thought. So I started just sending out direct mail to people in our county here who own the property free and clear. So then the next thing that happened is, I was making this offer and they sometimes they didn't take it, right? Like the very best acquisitions person going out and buying a property gets 1 out of 10. Like that's the best. So, which is great, but then you also should think as a business owner, well, what about the other nine people that I couldn't help, right? Because
right,
that's our job as wholesalers and investors is let's go out and help people. So I said, well, what could I offer these people? And again, because I had education, I went back to, how we used to make offers on to sub two people or people where we are going to take over their mortgage. So I said, well, I wonder if I could craft an owner financing offer, right? So what would happen is, let's say I was talking to you and, I offered you 90,000 and you wanted 130 or whatever it was. If you couldn't take it, I'd say, well, she really can't take 90. I mean, I can close quick. Nope, can't do it. Okay. Hmm. Um, Let me ask you a question. Hmm. And I'd really rather buy this cash, but Don, do you need all the money at once? And then I would get an answer. And sometimes it would be yes, but sometimes it would be no. And when it was no, well, then I had the opportunity to present them, hey, here's how we can do this another way, right? Here's how we can do this. And obviously, we're going to make payments to you. And we were just setting up owner financing. And over the course of 4 or 5 years, I bought over 100 of these things that way. And sometimes it was a single property, sometimes it was a package. Lots of times it was packages because who owned free and clear properties? Landlords, right? And landlords are the easiest people to get this from, because when I'm going to visit them or I'm talking to them on the phone, I know because I can look it up and see that there's no mortgage on the property, right? So then my conversation dawned with them is, hey, Bob, that's great. What's the best part about being a landlord? What do you think the answer is? A
Cash
monthly
flow.
check, right? Cash flow, right? Easy. Also, in the same conversation, how'd you get started? How'd you fund your deals? How'd you do all this stuff? Well, I'm just getting going in this. Bob, what's the worst part about being a landlord? What do you think the answer is? Right? We only ask questions we know the answer to, right? Tenants, trash, and toilets. It's very
Right.
simple. So, we make the cash offer. You can't take that, which I would prefer they take the cash offer, right? Because then I can wholesale it for quicker cash. But if they couldn't, then I make them the offer. Geez, do you know this? Do you need all the cash at once? And then if there's any hesitation, hey Bob, I know you really like that cash flow. Sorry, I got an itchy throat. How about if you could still have that cash flow and not have to deal with the tenants, trash, and toilets? How great would that be, right? So, so that was how we sort of slid backwards into owner financing and buying a bunch of properties.
So basically what you would do is you'd like, oh, I'd really buy this cash. And you just pause and you sit there.
No,
Well, it's not my favorite thing, but gosh, do you need all the money at once? And if they said,
no,
well, not necessarily, then all you would say is, well, then you ask them the questions.
yeah, I'd say,
What's
well,
the best? What's the best part? What's the worst part? And what
yeah,
if you could still get that?
yeah.
And
It's
also, is that
so
all you
simple.
said? Is that all you
That's
said?
that's really it. Like I've done it hundreds of times, and it doesn't always work. But if they say yes, I'd say, or even if they're thinking about it, I pull out my phone. I go, well, I go to my mortgage calculator, and I knew what it would rent for, right? Say, well,
Right.
I might actually be able to get you more than what you're asking for. How can you do that? Well, you know, so
I
it's so
love
elegant. It's stupid simple, right? It's not hard.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I
I
teach,
think that's I love hearing that because sometimes I think one thing that it's tough for me is to remember, like I used to work in the ER. I was
yeah,
an ER nurse, ICU, and in the medical profession, you have your own lingo that nobody else gets
yeah,
unless they're in it. And then being in the note business for a long time, I forget that it's a whole language that
yeah,
not a lot of people are familiar with. And
no,
so I really love these examples because I think a lot of times I use words I expect
yeah,
people, even like
can't do it.
real estate, even agents. A lot of times I think I'm being very straightforward and common talk, and they'll go, I don't get it. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I
Most of
really
them are dummies. Yeah. Well, so
well, I
so
don't
all
like
this,
to talk. Hopefully, if they're following along my
yeah,
podcast on YouTube, they're
sometimes.
they're
Not
they're a
all of them,
little
but a
more
lot of them.
educated.
Yeah.
But I love the simplicity of that.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's but you're not even bringing up because a lot of times I've said, hey, well, what are you going to do with the money? I mean, like,
I mean, you can, sure,
what's your capital gains going to be? Because that's a huge one, especially for investors. They own a
So
portfolio free and clear. They have
yeah.
a high capital gains to
So what I would if I was going to say that, because listen, I tell people I'm just a simple caveman, like a wholesaler, right? I'm not that smart. So so I would say I'm like, hey, I'm definitely not an accountant, but I think if I gave you the $1 million or the 500,000 or 100,000, you're probably going to pay like a third of that in taxes. But if you took it little by little, probably your other income would, or other expenses would completely offset it. And again, you know, didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night. I am not an accountant, but this would definitely reduce your taxes. So all of this kind of comes from two places. When I went and did my first offer to somebody sub two, and I was, we're negotiating it back and forth, and they were actually giving me higher repair numbers than I had budgeted. So they were unknowingly pushing down their own equity. And I was so nervous and scared because I'm such an introvert that my like insides just felt like I was busting, right? So I had to just like slow down and like, okay, don't be nervous, don't get excited, just relax, right? So I just sort of adopted that those kind of long pauses where I'd be like, and the other thing is, for someone who's maybe if you're a football fan, right? You've got the passing game where it goes very, very fast, right? And that's what you're talking about, using that inside lingo. And then
Right.
there's the running game that's slow. what you have to remember is most of these people that we're talking to when we're talking to a seller, this is the first time, what do they sell a house? Three times in a life, four times in a lifetime, right? And they had
Right.
an agent that held their hand and it was very typical, right? And what we're asking them to do is something atypical, right? It's not something that they understand. Hell, I don't understand half the time, right? So we have to explain it very simply for them, right? And by going slow, here's the way when I'm doing it, I'm talking and I'm thinking, like I want you to see the thought bubbling over my head, right? I want you to be like,
Hmm.
right? Like it's the first time I've ever thought of this, right? Because if I'm going real fast, right, I can go faster. Hey, Don, so hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to write this note. It's going to come back to me. We're going to do it at 2% interest for the first 3 years, and then we're going to do 5% after that, and we're going to amortize it. We're going to put a 10-year balloon in. Come on, man. They're going to go into the fetal position, and they may say yes to get you out of their house, right? But like they are never going to follow through with that contract, right? Because it just gets to be too much. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I
So
totally
it gets
appreciate that.
confusing because a confused mind will always say no.
They
Right.
know.
And it
Yeah.
happens to all of us, right? I had someone trying to sell me websites and they got on and they're like, oh, we're going to do this. We're going to do upsells and downsells and tripwires. And I'm like, I don't understand what the heck you're talking about. Right.
Yeah.
And
Go.
that's what we do as investors sometimes. So I always caution people, don't try to show somebody how smart you are. Right. You're going to
Yeah.
talk yourself right out of that deal.
That's great insight. I really love that. So you said before we started the podcast that
Yeah.
you bought a bunch, you've done a bunch of wholesaling, and then
Yeah.
but you also have in portfolio a lot of properties you bought with seller financing that you still
Yeah.
have. I assume they're rentals.
Yeah. Yeah. They're all rentals. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm very basic single family rentals and student rentals. That's it. I never really got into the Airbnb craze. I just felt like it could be regulated really easy, and our city did.
right.
So I never got into that or pad splitting or any of that. They're all good strategies. Just, for me, I just like, I didn't want to be in there turning them an Airbnb like a hotel every 4 days. I just wanted to set it and kind of forget it. And I had enough to worry about with rehabs and all the other things I was doing. I did not need to take on any extra jobs. So uh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I like that. And before we get into what you're doing now,
yeah.
sitting there with a bunch of property with seller financing,
Hmm.
that's like a perfect exit strategy for you to sell with owner financing.
Yeah, so when I bought them, coming out of, kind of coming up through that bubble, three bubbles ago or whatever it was, and then I saw so many people just lose their behinds with '09 and 10, right? People who are way over leveraged. And I'm
Right,
literally, there's a guy in town here who had 200 properties and lost them all or almost all of them to the
right,
bank. So I've always been very careful not to get over leveraged. And, when I was buying these properties, I was in my, real late 30s, early 40s. My plan as like all of growing up was I was going to retire at 50. So I was really mad that I wasn't going to get this done. I couldn't possibly get it done by, well, that's not true. You can always do it, but there was no reasonable way to get all these properties paid off by the time I was 50, right? Because the goal is I wanted to pay them off, have the cash flow, go sit on the beach someplace. So I had to accept that, okay, I'm going to have them paid off by the time I'm 60. So the great thing about owner financing is I was creating the notes, so I could structure them however I wanted, 4%, 5%, 3%, 0%, whatever.
right.
And so when I started, I was putting everything on a 20-year note. And then, as I got a little bit older, I had to start putting stuff on shorter notes. So, one of the biggest packages I did was 1.1 million on a 17-year term at 4% interest with no payments for 3 months. Plus I got 10 grand back at closing. Right. So again, just trying to have everything kind of just target the same end date. So that's great. So now that I'm 53, everything's coming up in the next few years where everything will be paid off free and clear.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And well, it's just always like for me, I would rather have a note than a rental, but I guess
Yeah.
a lot of people are oriented. I don't know. It seems like there's a big attack on personal property rights. I never know. They
Yeah.
talk about regulating Airbnb. The
Yeah.
government just told property owners they couldn't evict and couldn't foreclose there for a bit. So
Yeah.
everything seems to have its share of risk, but
Yeah. It all does. Sure.
yeah, interesting. So
Yeah.
anyway, let's fast forward to you said I think about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
What made you do what you do now? Let's hear about it.
Yeah. So, Easy REI Closings, we're again a large virtual transaction coordination company. So we have clients all over the country, a couple hundred, and we help them get their deals closed. We also work with some specialty people and handle notes and, kind of running, doing the transactional part of the note business, which isn't always a closing. But yeah, we're just very involved in that side of the business. And it came up sort of by accident. I'm actually sitting in the room where our coordinators originally were at. But when COVID happened, we were a nationwide wholesaler. We were in 28 states. And I had three coordinators in here. And remember when COVID first started, everybody panicked and laid off a bunch of people. So some of my friends called me and they're like, "Hey, you still have coordinators?" I let mine go because remember, business like rebounded very quickly in like 4 to 6 weeks
Right.
after that. So like, "Oh, can you help us close some deals because you've got these three?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure, sure, we can do that." So it was kind of like that. We sort of fell backwards into it. I'm like, "Oh, this might be something that the market needs." And it's funny, Don, I went to this big mastermind down in Tulum, like probably the top 50 wholesalers in the country were there. And I said, thinking about starting this business. Be a transaction coordination company. And one of my buddies is like, "Dude, that's the dumbest effing idea I've ever heard in my life. It is the worst business ever." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, man. I think it might work." He's like, "That's just brain damage. Why would you want to do that?" I'm like, "Because that's exactly why. Because nobody wants to do it. Nobody's good at it." Because,
Right.
when we all started this and read Rich Dad Poor Dad or came across your podcast or a video or whatever it is, like nobody ever said you need to learn what title abstracting is and hey, go get good at monument of title, right? Like, no, nobody's good at that, right? We're good at talking to people and making deals and,
Right.
crafting all kinds of different offers. But, the thing about us as investors, first off, we should be helping people, right? That's our job. But we go out and we look for people with problems, right? And the more problems we can solve, the deeper the discount that we can get, right? So death, divorce, taxes, bad tenant, probate, the water
Quarter
shut
house.
off. Yeah, yeah, all these weird things. So then, even if we're going to buy it ourselves or we're going to sell to somebody else, we still have to get clear title. And somebody has to do that and understand how to navigate those problems. So that's what we do. We're just specialists at that. And
So basically, if I get a property under contract, and I've opened escrow, and then I hand it to you guys, or I hand it to you guys, and you guys open escrow,
yeah,
and you
yeah,
just you walk it through to the end.
the whole thing. From the moment you get that contract signed, you hand that over to us and we will take it from there. We will call your seller. "Hey, Mrs. Smith, this is David. I'm working with Dawn on your deal over here at 123 Main Street. Hey, Mrs. Smith, I'm going to be your point of contact from here all the way till closing. So you're out, right? Go get your next deal, go sell your deal, go whatever it is that you're going to do. Mrs. Smith, I'm going to need to collect some information from the title company so we get you paid just as quickly as possible." That's it.
Right.
And that
So
that just that just kicks the first domino. And now we're collecting a lot of information. That information tells us where the problems are so that we can get those solved. So we can get you just closed just as quickly as possible. Right. So
yeah,
effectively, you're just hiring us to give you back your time.
yeah. Basically, you're like you said before, is
Mhm.
you're taking instead of me having to hire a part-time person
Yeah.
or something. It's like I'm just outsourcing my back office. So a lot of real estate,
Mhm.
companies, they have their transaction coordinators that just
Sure.
take it over after that. And so you're providing that. Now, I'm curious, you said about notes. What sort of aspect of the note business are you doing in the transaction coordinating?
Yeah,
Give me an
we've got
example of that.
yeah, and I am not the best person to speak on it because I have our title company handles a lot of it. But the we have one, partner who buys a lot of notes. So some they'll buy from tapes. Those are very simple on the intake side. We're bringing it in, putting it into, our CRM, making sure that we're collecting all of the information, the underlying paperwork, was there a credit check done, all of the different things to make sure that it's good paper. If they're buying them from an individual, then it's very similar to the business that we do with house buyers. We need the lease, we need, or, whatever documentation you've got. Same thing, copy of the down payment receipt, and did you do a credit check on them, or did, whatever it is. So gathering that up, and then when they are turning around and reselling those notes, same thing, making sure that everything is packaged up and kind of going out the door, and just all of the information that you would individually have to collect. We can do all that for you too.
Yeah, it's people go, well, how do you sell a note? And it's actually very similar. Well, it's related. They're
Mhm.
cousins, right?
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, people can say, well, that seems a lot more complex.
Mhm.
But in other ways, it's simpler because
Yeah. 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 I mean, yeah,
you're
it's good.
only recording an assignment of the security instrument
Yeah.
and getting an allonge or an endorsement on the note. And but
Mhm.
there are very similar things. In fact, so our as a matter of practicality, are you're working with people who are buying institutional tapes or private mom and pop tapes?
They're buying some of both. They're a pretty big note
Oh,
buyer.
both.
Yeah.
Hmm. So, as a matter of practicality, are you using what's the like a go high level type platform, or
It's
how are
a
these
yeah,
or
it's a really customized version of Airtable, essentially. A
mm,
Kanban type view. So that we've got it set up, and I haven't actually seen it, to be honest with you. My vice president of operations and our title company have set this up, but where we can show a status that this note, this file is moving through the process.
gotcha? And what
Yeah.
kind of what are the different price points for the products that the services that you offer?
Yeah, because notes are a little bit different. So we would have that conversation. We would sit down with somebody and say, hey, tell us exactly what you're doing. And the person if you wanted to do this, I would set you up with like Megan in our office and she would go through and price that for you. But it's very reasonable, much cheaper than doing it in-house. And also, you can add it as a fee on the selling side to cover that cost. It's
Gotcha.
just an
Now,
administrative fee.
gotcha. How about just for a regular wholesale, no,
Yeah.
no, no hair
Yeah.
on it?
Mhm.
What kind
So
of
well, they're all a little bit hairy. So we don't work on a one-off situation for anybody. We work on a subscription fee, subscription model. So for us, our base plan right now is 1 to 5 deals, which is a little less than $2,000 a month. So basically $400 per file, which is, we don't charge per file, but if you were divided out, and that's about half the price of anybody else in the industry. And nobody else is nationwide or does all transaction types, any of that type of stuff. So
so
we try to make it incredibly affordable. And in fact, most of our clients, we'll show them how to put in an administrative fee into their selling contract, or even some people put it into their buying contract so they can actually turn transactions into a profit center. So it works out good.
okay, so basically, if you're doing even if you're doing none,
Yeah.
if you sign up,
Mhm.
it's 2,000 a month for the base
Yeah.
thing. If you
Yeah.
do none or you do five,
Same
it's the
price.
2,000,
Mhm.
right?
Yep. Exactly.
Um, interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm. And you're saying that your competitors out there are
Oh, there are people
charging,
on some sites that do, they're very small independent people that I've seen anywhere from 12 to 1800 per file. Very common.
gotcha, but
Yeah.
not they're charging per file instead of a subscription.
Yeah. And here's the reason for the per file from a business perspective, it's terrible. In a typical wholesale or investor transaction, 40% of those deals die. Right. So what happens is for us, we're so front end heavy where we do so much of the work the moment you give me that contract that 40% of those deals are going to die and we would have worked for free for 40% of the time.
You know what? That
So
makes
for yeah, so for us, we had to look at it and say, okay, we don't want to do that because I have some amazing people, but none of them want to work for free. So we can't do that. So how can we do this where it makes sense, where we can provide some value, great value, and do it for you at a better price? Well, let's kind of do it as little bundles, right? So depending upon where your business is at as you grow, then 6 to 10, 11 to 20, that type of stuff.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So wow, you guys have created little pods in every state to be compliant, and you have your people there, your
Yeah.
title companies, your attorneys, whatever
Yeah.
you need.
Yeah,
You've
and it was far more challenging than you would think. It's one of those things that seems very simple when you're thinking about it and you're writing it on the whiteboard for the first time. Let me just draw this out because I love drawing it out on the whiteboard. But really, yeah, I just got an amazing team. I've got an amazing team that's so, I used to think I was good at solving title problems, but they've really taken it to a whole nother level.
that's been yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Always curious to see what people are doing out there. I know a friend of mine in the note business, he has one or two in-house
Mhm.
people, to
Yeah.
run it. But you might go, well, okay, he's saying, well, per deal that we do, this is how much I'm paying, but it doesn't matter. If there's nothing coming in, he still has that overhead, that
Yeah.
salary.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And for us,
it's a
even
skill.
even
Yeah,
for
I
an
mean,
investor, we're cheaper than the person at McDonald's, right? You're not hiring anybody to do this for $24,000 a year.
no, and
Yeah.
yeah, and if you did, you would get what you pay for. That's
You
sure. Yeah,
100%
it's going to
would.
cost you close transactions, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So
How-
so that's where we can do it at a super low rate. Plus, we'll show you how to offset it. And you're getting the most experienced people in the country to do it. We did last year 2,202 files, $238 million in closing. So we do a lot. We do a lot of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and you're still, and you just started up a podcast, and you're still busy. You want more. You're big, and you want
Well,
more,
I
and you're
think that's
getting
the
the word
sickness of
out
all of
more.
us entrepreneurs, right? We always want more, and there's always another mountain to climb and something else. But no, we were talking earlier. I think the reason podcasting it's great. One, it's great to get your name out there and what you do, but more than that, it's the opportunity to come on and bring people on from different parts of the industry and have these conversations and learn stuff, right? A podcast, everybody wants to come on your podcast, so it's a great way to interview them and kind of get to
Yeah,
know them
see,
and learn
yeah,
stuff.
no, it is fabulous. Now, let me ask you this. How many of those wholesaling deals, are there any percentage where the investor or the wholesaler is actually getting terms from the seller?
Yeah, yeah. So the way our business breaks down is a little over 40% are novations, about 45% are assignments, and then that other maybe 10%, 11% has been creative deals. So, and that has actually grown over the last year. It's actually a little bit more. It's probably closer to 15% right year to date. So yeah, lots more notes, lots more sub two wraps, that type of stuff.
Yeah. So are people doing what you did and going after those free and clear people? Because
Um,
that's where
I've been screaming it from the rooftops that you should be marketing to free and clear people. It's the best list out there.
I know, because there's, okay, all the rage is this sub
Mm.
two, subject
Yeah,
to, if you want to say it correctly, subject to. Sub two is the kind of gangsta sort of internet way to talk about
yeah,
SUB two,
yeah,
sub
yeah,
two.
yeah.
So, but there's a lot of landmines I see
Mhm.
happening with that whole
Oh,
industry. I think it's people are doing it wrong a lot. I
I
think
think
it's
I
really
agree.
risky. I think it's
I
going to blow up on us at some point.
Yep, I agree. I think it's the next thing to get regulated, and it
Oh
probably
yeah.
should be.
Yeah.
Even us with our clients, sometimes they'll come to us and like the seller doesn't know the mortgage is being left in place. I'm like, no, the seller has to know. We're going to make them sign a disclosure. They're not coming back at me because you wanted to
Right.
bamboozle them, right? Or did a bad job explaining it. No,
Right.
I think it's a great tool, but I think it's incredibly risky the way some people are doing it.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
But the point where I'm really interested is the free and clear people in particular,
Yeah.
or they have a very low mortgage. It's,
Mhm.
to me, the benefits or the sweet spots are people who have a high mortgage, like almost no equity, and the ones who have 100% equity. So it's
Yeah.
kind of the spectrum, and what's happening, or what I'm focusing on is like
Yeah.
saying, hey, you've got 100% equity. And when I run my numbers, and if I was doing it like David, I'd just be going, hmm,
Yeah.
well, gosh, well, I could put $10,000 down, and then I could.
Oh, I don't put any money down. I have a almost $10 million portfolio. I have $6,000 down on it. Why
You're
offer that?
kidding me. You normally don't even put a down payment.
I'll give them an option. I'll give everybody three options. The wholesale option, they finance 100%, and then like me giving them two to maybe 10,000. They almost always take the higher option because I'm going to pay them the full price. The middle option where I give them some money is going to be a lower price, kind of in the middle. They
Gotcha.
always want the money.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Happens every so often they'll ask for some down payment, but it's not a lot. It's very, very rarely. No, I
Yeah.
want to be as light as possible. I don't want to,
Well, oh no, no, I totally get that.
yeah.
It's well, let's just presume a seller knows that is not exactly the best underwriting for them. Luckily,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, everybody's different, but also in the same way, I don't assume everybody's an idiot. I also don't assume everybody has a Harvard MBA. You know what I mean?
no,
So
right.
what's their, and this is when we're having that conversation with the seller, which I don't come out of the chute and offer, however I do it, offer owner financing, right? I really want to figure out, what's going on with them? What is their pain point? What problem can I solve?
Right.
Right. So, and that's really our job as investors is to solve the problem.
Mhm.
This happened. So what you're thinking, that was the way that I used to think too. I had just come to Chattanooga, and I had paid one of my mentors from Orlando to fly up here and speak at our RIA, and he was kind of giving me a day at the office, and I was sitting there writing up an offer on this package of 6 properties, and his name was Augie Bilot, super brilliant guy out of Orlando, and I'm writing it up. I'm like, okay, 70,000, 80,000, all the different properties. I'm like, 8% interest. And he's like, why are you doing 8%? I'm like, I don't know. Isn't that what people do? He's like, I don't know. What do you want to offer? I'm like, well, less. He's like, I'll offer less. Right. Like it's just an offer. Like you don't have to assume they're going to want 10% interest. I've I have a million, almost $1.2 million package at 4% interest when 4% interest was not the thing, right? This was back when it was still 7%. Just make the offer and solve, people just want their problem solved. Most of them are not as slick as that, right? They're like, oh, I want 25% down or something. And some people will say that, and you can pass on them. You don't have to take those deals, right? When I started, I had the luxury of being broke. So I did not have, $100,000 in the bank, right? So it forced me to make better deals. I literally could not have done it.
Yeah.
I probably had no business buying my first couple of properties, that I was buying for $200 a month per door cash flow. Um, but
Yeah, that's in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I was just showing a couple examples where people are asking for financing that I would be embarrassed to ask for. So there again, it's like I just got to get over myself because and if you think that everyone's thinking the way you do, but they don't,
yeah,
and they have different needs
yeah,
and all of that. And as long as the person on the other side of it has integrity, which
yeah,
obviously you do if you've been in business this long, but I've there's the scams going out there.
sure. Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Lots of bad scams to really rip the equity away from these people. But
sure.
if it's done properly,
Yeah.
and with good people, makes all the difference. But
Yeah,
if
for us, we honestly, I have no problem offering above the tax assessed value or above the market value. I don't care because that doesn't matter to me. I'm more interested in the cash flow, right?
no,
This is why we close an attorney's office or a title company where, I would, Don, if we were having this conversation, you're ready to sign, I would say to you, hey, do you have any questions? No. Well, here's the question you should be asking. How do you know I'm going to pay? Like I'll just throw that right. Like you should want to know that. And they're like, oh, thank God. Like they were afraid to ask. I'm like, well, first off, you can pull me up in the county records, Hamilton County, Tennessee. Lots of properties, right? We're for real. We do this. Number two, I'm not going to buy something, to have you take it back, which you can 100% take it back. And if they're still worried, I'll escrow a quick claim deed back to them with a letter that we both sign that says if I become 60 days past due, take this to the title company, have them file the quick claim deed, take it back. Why would I? And then I say, why would I do that? They're like, I don't know, because I don't plan on not paying you. That's it. Right. I
yeah,
mean,
that's great.
you know,
Now,
so
if there's a property that you really wanted and everything else worked out, but they wanted more down payment than you were willing to put down,
mhm.
what would you do?
So that happened to me in the very beginning. I had to go find a partner to put up the $2,000 per property in 2009 that literally I did not have, which is embarrassing to even say those words out loud. But yeah, I mean, I'd go find a partner. I don't love that because I hate bringing in partners like that. But either I would give it to them or I would pass on the deal. I mean, those are your options.
Yeah, I like that. And when I did my first deal, I'd quit my nursing job in 2004, and I did my first as a principal. I'd worked for someone else, and was learning the real estate and loans, and building up my note business side of things all during those years.
Mhm.
But I didn't have, like, I go, I only put down 5,000 in this example. And I go, you know what, guys? That's all the money I had
Yeah.
in my savings account
Yeah.
when I started. I'd spent so much money taking the workshops and the courses that by the time I was ready to do deals, I didn't have a lot of money left. And
Yeah.
so it actually was a blessing, because then, nope, I just can't pay it. And then two, it teaches you how to partner with other people who want their
Mhm.
money to be at work but aren't the deal makers.
Yeah.
But here's just another idea that's just to throw out there to see what you say. Because what I would say is, if the seller wants more money than you have for a down payment, let's say they just we need to pay off a medical bill, we need to buy a new
Mhm.
car, septic went
Yeah.
bad, we need a down payment on another
Yeah.
property. um, I'll say, great, let's bring me in. We'll create the note in such a way that I can buy a front end partial of the note. So
Mhm.
they get your down payment, they get a sale of maybe three,
Good.
4, 5 years of the note, then they get the
Mhm.
money they need, but they haven't discounted. You know how steep the discounts can be these
Sure.
days, right? If someone's selling a 30-year note,
Yep.
right? But this is a way where they take almost no discount. So we get the
Yeah.
money to the closing table. So have you done that? Or have you seen
I
other
have
people?
not. I'm not that smart. Again, simple caveman. I understand what you're saying now, but 10 years ago, I had no earthly clue what any of that meant.
Right.
So here's here's a way that I try to avoid a lot of that stuff, and that's by keeping control of the transaction. Hey, do you need all the money at once? No. Okay, let me go back to my office, or let me work up a couple of ways that we can do this. I'm going to present you the offer. Pick the one that works. So it's going to be three offers, right? I have this course called Three Offers to Freedom. This is exactly how we did it. My bottom offer is your cash offer. My top offer is everything they want, with zero down and, whatever interest rate I pick. And then I'll tell them, hey, total payout over the course of the loan is, it's what, 60% more than whatever they were asking for. And then my
If
middle
not
offer.
double. If
Yeah,
not
yeah.
double.
Yeah, depending upon the interest rate. And then my middle offer is going to be a small amount down at a lower, but even still, the total course of the loan is going to be over what they were asking, right? So by presenting the offers, I'm giving them one of three things. Psychologically, the power of three, they're going to want to pick one. Do they always? No, they're not always going to. But remember, it goes back to 1 out of 10. I'm taking a second bite at the apple, right? I want 1 out of 9, 1 out of 18, right? 1 out of 18 is great, right? Because for every deal you get, for every two deals, wholesale deals, you get one owner finance deal. So that's how, I just control it, you know. And
Gotcha.
again, I wasn't out there at $800,000 properties. These were $100,000 properties, $150,000
Gotcha.
properties,
Yeah. Well, these
blue
days,
collar rental type properties.
yeah, no, gotcha. A lot of the people that would be listening to this show too are
Mhm.
realtors a lot of
Sure.
realtors, they have buyers with a big down payment actually,
Yeah, sure.
but who can't or won't get the
Yeah,
financing. And
sure.
they just
That.
don't know how to present the offer. So those are
Yeah,
the people that I'm trying to work with to
yeah,
say, hey, here's how to present the offer. Put it into my system and I'll spit you out some things that you can present
yeah.
with your
Love
offer.
it.
And then if they don't understand here's some educational material about, I wrote a book called Boomer Real Estate Rescue.
Love it.
It's a little introduction for people who've never heard of it before. But anyway, and then if you need more money at closing, there's little to no discount for most of the things that we do. So that way they're not chopped off at the knees if they just need a little more cash at closing than the buyer has for a down payment. But
Uh,
anyway, that got down into the weeds. That's not for
yeah.
David Olds. He's the caveman. And you know what? Point well taken. It's a great reminder to all of us who get really fancy with our financial calculators and,
Yeah.
positioning. But to tell you the truth, Dave, it's in the note business. I'm not, just like with property, I'm not the highest bidder. I'm not
Mhm.
going to compete with these 30 somethings that
Yeah.
have seen, the downside, or I
Sure.
won't pay the most on notes. And so when I have mom and pop investors that come in with me and this is their retirement, I'm very conscious of safety. So I like
Sure.
that, being less than 50 cents investment to value, just in case if the market crashes again, then,
Check in.
these people that invest with me
Mhm.
still can eat. So, all
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Where do people find you and what do you want to share?
Yeah, I'm very easy to find on Instagram. We post a ton of content every day, and it's just at David Olds, OLDSREI. And then yeah, if you're interested in talking about transactions, if we can help you, easy, the letter E, the letter Z, REI, closings with an S.com. And book a call with me and love to jump on with you.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
All right,
All
you bet.
right. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.